The sun had barely risen over Manhattan when Barron Trump stepped out of the back seat of a black sedan, his long coat brushing against his ankles. He had asked the driver to drop him off 2 blocks away, not wanting attention, not here, not today. St. Paul's Chapel, nestled quietly between tall modern buildings near NYU's campus, had stood for nearly 3 centuries. It had survived wars, fires, and the chaos of a changing city. And now it stood as a refuge for a boy who had been silent too long. Inside, the wooden pews were half empty. A handful of early risers sat scattered throughout the sanctuary, heads bowed, whispering prayers no one else could hear. The smell of old wood, candle wax, and winter coats hung in the air. Barron chose a seat near the back. No security, no aides. Just him and the silence he had grown so accustomed to. He didn't come to pray. Not exactly. He came to think, to listen to the absence of voices, to sit where no one expected him to perform or pretend. He had been coming here for weeks now, always unnoticed, always quiet. But today was different. Today the silence felt heavy, crowded, like even God was waiting for him to speak. A priest passed him by with a gentle nod, recognizing his face but saying nothing. That was the unspoken rule here. No cameras, no gossip, just breath and reflection. Suddenly, a familiar voice broke the quiet. "Barron," he turned. It was Reverend Michael Farrow, the 65-year-old pastor of the chapel, a quiet man with eyes like weathered stone, and a patience that seemed older than the church itself. "You've been coming here a lot," Reverend Farrow said, sitting down beside him. Barron nodded slowly. "I like the silence," Barron answered, his voice low, steady. "It doesn't ask me to explain myself." The Reverend folded his hands. "That's rare. Most people come here because they want answers." "I'm not looking for answers," Barron replied. "Just space." "Space from what?" Reverend Farrow asked. Barron hesitated. Then, "From being someone I'm not." The Reverend studied him for a long time, not interrupting. Finally, he said, "Do you want to tell me what happened?" Barron looked up toward the stained glass windows, where pale light painted halos on the walls. "They turned a joke into a war," Barron said, almost as if reciting a psalm. "A dumb White House hallway joke about me not getting into Harvard. Suddenly, I became a symbol for everything my father hates, and my silence made it worse. They used me to fight battles I never chose." Reverend Farrow leaned forward. "And your mother?" "She made a statement. She denied the rumor. Said I never applied to Harvard. It should have ended there." "But it didn't," the Reverend said quietly. "No," Barron replied, "because people don't care about truth. They care about what truth says about their side. That's why I'm here. I don't want to be a side." Reverend Farrow sat back and let the words settle. Then gently, "You know, even in silence, you've been speaking. Every time you came here, every moment you sat in that pew, you've been asking the world for something." "What?" Barron asked. "A chance to be heard on your own terms," the Reverend answered. Barron looked down at his hands, then out across the vast, quiet chapel. He didn't cry, he didn't fidget, but something inside him, something carefully locked away, began to shift. And just then, as the organ began to hum softly in the distance, he whispered, "Maybe it's time I speak." 2 days later, the sky above New York City had turned a dull shade of pewter, and the wind carried with it the weight of something unspoken. Inside St. Paul's Chapel, where history clung to every stone and nail, Barron sat again, but not in the back pew this time. He was in a small side room just past the vestry, a space normally used for private prayer, or sometimes quiet grief. The walls were bare save for a wooden cross above the mantel and a dusty bookshelf with faded leather-bound Bibles. A single lamp cast a golden light across the room, warming the otherwise cold stone floor. Barron sat in front of a simple camera, set up on a tripod by Reverend Farrow himself. No lights, no crew, just the truth. "You can speak whenever you're ready," Reverend Farrow said gently, stepping back and taking a seat in the corner. Barron adjusted the collar of his dark coat. His fingers were steady, though his heartbeat felt like a drum pounding in an empty cathedral. He looked into the lens, and after a long breath, he began. "I've spent most of my life being spoken for," he said, "by headlines, by political strategists, by people who've never sat with me in silence." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. They said I was rejected by Harvard, that my father went on a crusade because of it, that my mother tried to hide the truth. I'm not here to defend any of them. I'm not here to blame anyone. I'm here because I realize if I don't speak, my silence becomes theirs to use. He looked down briefly, then back up. "I never applied to Harvard," he said clearly. "Not because I wasn't good enough, but because I didn't want to. I wanted New York. I wanted a city that doesn't care who your father is. I wanted to walk among people who live real lives, who cry on subway cars and laugh in coffee shops and don't measure their worth in legacy." There was a pause, then he continued, slower this time. "My father is many things. Powerful, loud, relentless. But I am not him. I don't want to fight universities. I don't want to threaten institutions. I want to understand them." The words echoed, not just through the room, but in the quiet conviction behind them. "And my mother? She tried to protect me. Maybe that's all a mother can do when the world won't stop watching. But I don't want to be protected by silence anymore." From the corner, Reverend Farrow watched, not with pride, but with reverence. "People think silence is weakness," Barron continued. "It's not. Sometimes it's the heaviest armor. But armor gets heavy when you carry it too long. And I'm done carrying mine." He leaned slightly forward, eyes fixed on the camera. "I'm 19. I'm not a symbol. I'm not a scandal. I'm just trying to learn how to live in a world that made up its mind about me before I could speak." Then softly, "This is my voice. Take it as it is." He reached forward, clicked the camera off, and leaned back in the chair. The room was silent once again, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It was clean, honest. Reverend Farrow stood and walked over. He placed a hand on Barron's shoulder. "You spoke like a man who knows what silence costs," he said. Barron nodded. "I do." "And now?" "Now," Barron said, "I want them to hear me for the first time." It was a Thursday morning when the video went live. No press release, no Twitter announcement, just a quiet upload to a nameless YouTube channel created only hours earlier. In less than 12 hours, it had already passed 4 million views. News outlets scrambled. CNN called it an unprecedented break from the Trump family tradition of tight-lipped legacy. MSNBC asked, "Is this the real voice of Barron Trump?" Even Fox News showed the full video without interruption. But inside the warm stone walls of St. Paul's Chapel, Barron didn't check the numbers. He returned to the same pew he sat in days earlier, this time alone. No security, no Reverend Farrow. Just him and the late morning sunlight filtering through stained glass windows. And then, the door creaked. He turned slightly and saw her, Melania, dressed in a charcoal gray wool coat, a black scarf around her neck, no makeup, no entourage. Her heels clicked once against the tile before she stopped walking. She didn't look like the former First Lady. She looked like a mother who'd flown across states for a son she hadn't been able to reach in weeks. "I saw the video," she said, her voice steady, but thin at the edges. Barron stood up slowly. "I figured you would." There was a pause, then she stepped forward and sat beside him in the pew. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked gently. "I didn't think you'd want me to," he answered. "You've always protected me through silence. I didn't want to break yours." She looked away toward the stained glass that cast a soft halo of red and blue on the floor. "I was protecting myself too," she said quietly. That surprised him. Melania turned to him. "Do you know how many lies I've let pass just because correcting them would mean inviting more?" Barron looked down. "I do. That's why I tried to disappear." She reached out, placing a hand lightly over his. "But you didn't," she said. "You sat here. You spoke. You were brave." "I wasn't trying to be brave," Barron replied. "I was just tired of feeling like a background actor in a play with my name on the poster." That made her smile faintly. Sadness folded inside it. "I used to think silence made things smaller, that if we didn't speak of something, it would go away. But silence only grows things in the dark." He turned toward her. "So now what?" Melania looked ahead again, at the altar that stood beyond the pews. "Now we learn to speak. Even if it's hard, even if the world twists it, at least it's ours. For a moment, they sat in silence, but not the kind that crushed, the kind that understood. She stood and leaned forward, kissing his forehead softly. "You made me proud," she said. "Even though I said everything?" Barron asked. "Because you said everything," Melania replied, her eyes softer than he'd seen in years. And then, without ceremony, she walked down the aisle and exited through the heavy wooden doors. Barron remained seated, alone again, but no longer invisible. Outside, protesters marched. Supporters rallied. News trucks lined the block. But inside that small chapel, where confession had turned into declaration, something fundamental had shifted. The pew wasn't just wood and velvet now. It had become a stage, a witness stand, a place of rebirth. Some stories are whispered behind closed doors. Others are shouted across podiums. But the most powerful ones often unfold in the quietest places, between the echo of wooden pews, beneath the muted light of colored glass, in a son's decision to no longer be a footnote in his own life. For years, Barron Trump lived inside a myth shaped by others. He was the shadow behind a father's legacy, the ghost in a marble mansion, the punchline in whispers that never asked how he felt. But when he stood inside that chapel, not to preach, not to protest, but simply to tell the truth, he didn't just reclaim his name. He redefined it. And Melania, a woman often described as frozen in elegance, revealed something far more enduring than grace. She revealed grief and guilt, and the silent ache of a mother who perhaps waited too long to say what mattered. But in the end, she showed up. She listened. She let herself be changed by the voice she helped raise. What happens now is not for headlines to decide. There may be backlash. There may be mockery. But what can't be undone is this: the silence is broken. Barron didn't need Harvard to validate him. He didn't need applause. What he needed was far rarer, a moment of truth shared between mother and son, in a place where no one was performing anymore. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is speak without asking for permission, and sometimes all it takes to change a legacy is one voice finally set free. Let's keep the conversation going. Subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts below. Your perspective is valuable and might inspire others.